Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted that you're part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple, wherever you find your podcast. Our guests today are Shovan and Saadia Faruqi, here to celebrate a place at the table. Before we invite Saadia and Laura into the studio, I want to ask you a question. Are you looking for the perfect holiday gift to inspire a love of reading in the kids that you love? With Wonder Crate, kids get a fun-filled package in the mail each month that contains a new book and activities to introduce them to real people that use their courage, perseverance, and passion to make the world a better place. Your kids can read about Sally Ride, the first American woman to fly into space, and then they can make their own glow-in-the-dark constellations. Or your kids can read about famed architect Frank Lloyd Wright, and then build their own architectural masterpiece. Wonder Crate introduces your kids to new innovators, activists, and artists every month because who they see shows them who they can be. Order yours today. Go to WonderCrateKids.com. Be sure to use the code word READ. You'll get 10% off of any subscription. This holiday season, give your kids a gift that inspires. Wonder Crate. Go to WonderCrateKids.com, use the code word READ, and receive 10% off every subscription. We are really, really excited. Tonight we're speaking to two wonderful authors. One of them is in Maryland. One of them is in Houston. They are the co-authors of A Place at the Table. Please welcome back to the show, Shovan, and welcome to the show for the very first time, Saadia Faruqi. Saadia, Laura, how are you guys?
Thank you. It's exciting to be here.
That voice that you just heard is Saadia, coming to us from Houston. Saadia, welcome to the show. We're excited to have you on.
Well, I'm looking forward to having a really good conversation today.
Yeah. And Laura, you may remember that Laura's been on the show a couple of times. She was here to talk about her middle grade novels, Takedown, a great book about a female wrestler, and also The Last Fifth Grade at Emerson Elementary. Laura, it's so great to see you back.
Wonderful to be here, Jed. Thanks for having us.
Saadia, could you give us sort of the overview of what A Place at the Table is all about, please?
Sure. So Place at the Table is a friendship story between two girls who couldn't be more different from each other. One is a Muslim girl called Sarah, who is a first-generation American girl whose family is from Pakistan. And the other is Elizabeth, who is a Jewish-American girl with a mom who's from England, and they are they're kind of thrown together in a team in an after school cooking club that they're a part of, and they have to learn to get to work with each other, but then also field a lot of unfortunate people and incidents that keep happening in the book. So a lot of real life middle school drama.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You don't have to be very creative to write about drama in middle school. It just seems to just ooze out of the lockers and the seats and the desks.
It's so funny because Saadia and I have talked about this many times, and she says, I never went to American middle school. I don't know what it's like. And but you have your kids, Saadia, so it's a very challenging time for kids. I remember it being challenging, especially 8th grade in particular, for me was difficult.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of it. I think school is hard for, at that age, for anywhere you live. But I've just seen a lot of not very nice things happen to my own kids. And that's the reason I'm kind of in a weird way, actually happy that this year we are there studying virtually, because I had been dreading having them go back into that environment. So it's, you have to take the silver lining where you get it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've talked a lot on the podcast about how difficult middle school is, and one of the things that we've discussed is that I think it's especially tough for young girls. Guys are into a lot of the physical stuff. A lot of guys, I think one of the biggest problems for guys is that they go to school thinking that everybody else knows all the answers, and they're afraid that people are going to find out that they don't know any of the answers. One of the things I told my son's friends when they were in middle school and would be talking nonsense in the back of my van, I remember stopping one day and saying, "You guys all think you know it all. None of you know anything, so why don't you just chill out?" But it's different for girls, and I wasn't a girl in middle school. So Laura, can you kind of give us what's it like for girls in middle school?
Yeah, I'm kind of shying away from some of the gendered conversations, especially about books and experiences. But I do think in many ways, kids who identify as female there is this sort of relational bullying that, it's been studied, like the Queen Bee's book that came out many years ago that ended up turning into the movie Mean Girls, studied this, and that's that there's sort of this training among girls that instead of fighting or even physically fighting, like sometimes is more accepted for males, that it's kind of all underneath. So it's that compliment that has a barb at the end, or it's the kid who knows how to be in front of adults, but as soon as the adults are out of the room is very controlling of other children, that kind of thing. So, and actually, it's interesting to me because we do have a character in the book who is leaning this way toward meanness and being a bully, and in fact goes pretty far and says some racist things to Sarah's character. And I was kind of chatting with another author about this, that I once had, I'm trying to remember which book it was. I think it was The Last Fifth Grade. I had somebody push back on a character and say, well, they're too mean. Nobody can be that mean without a reason. Like, I want to know the reason. Mm-hmm. And I think there are just some kids who kind of are mean, or they're testing out the power that comes with that. And one of the things I think that Saadia and I wanted to address in the book, although I don't know if we've ever spoken about it, kind of point blank, is how to set up boundaries when there are kids like that, and how Sarah's character kind of has to explain to Elizabeth's character, I have a boundary with this person who used to be your friend, and if you're going to be my friend, you have to have a boundary too, because she's doing some things and saying some things to me that are unacceptable. So, Saadia, do you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I think it was important for us to write a book in which we shared some maybe tips or guidance loosely about how to deal with maybe somebody who was not being really nice. And because it's so common, like Laura said, but we so many times talk about how awful middle school is, or how awful school in general is, but then we fail to give kids some help in how to dealing with that. And that's what we wanted to do with our book is, yes, this happens. Yes, there are kids who are mean. Yes, there are adults who are mean, but this is how you deal with them. Because otherwise we can talk about it all day long, but if we're not helping in any way, then what's the point?
Yeah.
And I saw that, with both my kids when I was writing this book. My son was in middle school and my daughter was in elementary school, and my son had a terrible time. And I grew up in a very different culture and a very different environment where adults were always there. Like this idea of, it's very American to just leave kids, to figure out their own problems and deal with stuff. I can't imagine doing that. And I can't imagine how kids, without giving them any tools. So for me, and this book was kind of like giving those tools, that here's how you stand up for somebody. Here's how you say something if somebody is being mean to you without being mean back, but making sure that that person gets the message, whether they're, because adults can do that too. A lot of adults with my son, it was teachers too. Mm-hmm. There were teachers who were bullies, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah.
We do have, I think, one of my favorite characters, like negative characters that I've ever worked on, is the teacher. The mean teacher in this book is basically the home economics teacher, whose kitchen is her kingdom, and her name is Mrs. Klukowski, and the kids call her Mrs. Cluck, and she just is like, she's such a full character. She has a certain outfit that she wears that's very brown and tweedy. And there's a lot of humor in her, but she does represent that adult who's just not as empathetic toward kids as you would hope an adult at a school would be.
Saadia, you brought up a really good point. This point about leaving kids to kind of figure things out by themselves, and it's really strange that it's happening now, because it seems like from birth until middle school, parents bubble wrap their kids to the point where they don't want them to fall down and scrape a knee. They don't let them play a sport where somebody's keeping score, and then it's middle school and it's like, okay, deal with it yourself, figure it out, and it's like, how am I going to figure out? I haven't been able to figure out anything before this.
I think one of the things that we talked about, and this was part of our process of working on the book together also, was having the girls engage in the story, in the context of the story, in conversations where they are hitting bumps in their relationship, and they have a choice to not be friends and say it's not worth it, but they don't. They decide that they're willing to put in the work to make this friendship happen, and they get coaching from both sets of parents. I think Elizabeth's mother in particular and Sarah's father in particular, the ones who kind of take them aside and have some conversations and say, it's okay to apologize. If you were an adult, you'd invite your friend out for coffee and talk things over.
Interesting. I'm really interested in the process of creating a place at the table. Both of you are very successful authors, and you both have, Saadia has her Yasmin series, and we've spoken about the two books that you've been on the show talking about, Laura and many others. How did you folks come together to write this book?
Well, Laura and I knew each other from, before just being part of the online Kidlit community. She had very kindly mentored me unofficially in a manuscript that I had been working on when I was just starting out, trying to find an agent and doing all that fun stuff that goes with, entering the children's author world. And then she approached me with an idea about a book about the first generation experience if you're with a parent who was, an immigrant. And we kind of decided that it was important to showcase, multiple sides to that, because everybody who is an immigrant in this country doesn't have the same experiences. If you're a person of color, you have much more negative experiences as an immigrant or a refugee or somebody, even who's first generation, like my kids, who are told every day to go back home, even though this is their home and this is where they were born. Whereas, white immigrants or white kids who are children of immigrants don't have those experiences. So we wanted to kind of explore some of that conflict and that dichotomy, and also share some of both of our personal experiences.
Laura, where did this inspiration for the story come from?
For me, this is my most, I don't want to call it autobiographical, but Elizabeth as a character has the most in common with me growing up as I've ever written. So my mom's from England, and she came to the United States when she got married to my dad and converted, changed religions. And, it was very, very hard for her. She was extremely isolated when she came here. So one of the issues that we bring up in the story is the stressors on first-generation American kids. And in Elizabeth's story in particular, we get a highlight on mental health because the mom in the story is struggling, as my mom did, with coping with assimilating and having these kids who are having a very different experience growing up than she did. And Saadia's character, whose last name is Hamid, her family, a good portion of the story highlights, or a section of the story, I should say, highlights some of the financial strains that can happen when families are immigrants, especially coming from countries where their degrees or their training might not transfer over to the United States, which, I've heard from many people, and that's a real hardship. It's a big decision to come to the United States realizing that your area of study, that you might not be considered an expert here, or you might not be able to rely on that for a job. So I really loved that Sarah's mother, they talk about the fact that she has a degree, and yet she has to rely on soft skills like her cooking. She runs this catering business and teaches this after-school club. So I learned a lot about that as well from working with Saadia.
Yeah. I think it's, we talk a lot here on the Reading with Your Kids podcast about reading with our kids of all ages. And so many families, you can read, cool, great, you're on your own, see you later, let me sit down and watch television. But it's so very important to continue to read with your kids. And if you don't feel comfortable reading aloud with your older kids, then reading together like you would with friends in a book club, sitting down and reading the books at the same time, co-reading, and then coming together and having conversations. Saadia, I think that this would be a wonderful book to just start those conversations about immigration and what kind of country do we want here, and helping our kids understand what it means to immigrate to a new country and how we can help folks who are immigrating here feel more comfortable and feel more welcome. What do you think about that? What kind of conversations do you think families can have?
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's one of my big goals with not just this book, but all my writing, is to showcase what goes on in the lives of immigrant families. It's easy to make it political, but then unless you actually know the struggles and the joys and whatever challenges families like mine face. And, everyone's different. I did not face a lot of challenges because my husband and I both came here as professional adults. And so we didn't, but, I couldn't use my degree, but I could go back to school. But I know a lot of people who have been struggling all their lives because they were in a very specific niche kind of profession that didn't transfer over. And now I'm seeing my mom, who has immigrated in her old age, and she has led such a full life as an educator, leading, being the head of a college, and now having absolutely nothing to do because, there's nothing to show that's American. And so those are things that, we have unfortunately a very one-sided kind of narrative about immigrants that, they'll come here and they'll take away our jobs. But we need to talk about, what are the struggles they're facing or how they can improve life for everybody else. And I always think that kids have the best discussions. A lot of times when my kids talk about some book they've read, I end up learning a lot because they're younger, they are more open, they want to hear different perspectives, and then they have great ideas. So even if it's an intergenerational kind of discussion where kids and parents or grandparents can talk together, or teachers and students, I think that it will be really eye-opening if educators and parents and families do something like that.
Saadia, you just hit on something that I think would be an incredible family experience. And now that when I was growing up, I had my entire family lived in the neighborhood that I was growing up in. It was wonderful, but it was really annoying because I could not do anything wrong. I got caught doing everything. Grown-ups would come up to me, see me do something, and give me a whack in the back of the head saying, "I'm your cousin. Go home. I'm going to tell your dad." But, no matter where your relatives live right now, we have this technology that we're using right now. You're in Houston. I'm in Boston. We can see each other. We can communicate. What a joy it would be to have that intergenerational book club where kids and parents and grandparents or great aunts and uncles can sit down, especially about this subject, because I'm second generation American. My grandparents immigrated here from Ireland. That would give me a completely different understanding of the situation. Laura, what do you think about that, having those intergenerational family book clubs?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. In fact, we ended up putting together a list of questions for families to ask about their family's immigration experience if they have, somebody who's a parent or a grandparent, someone in the family who immigrated. So those are available. I think they're on both our websites, and they're also at the We Need Diverse Books website. And we made these really cool conversation cards that you can print out or just share with your family. Interesting things came up. I had asked a bunch of my friends to chime in on this and share some of their questions. So some of the questions are things like, what was your day-to-day life like? What did your family change their name, which is something that happened in my family. When they immigrated and why. What do you know about the town that your family was from? I think I'm trying to remember if one of the questions is whether the family kind of was, like you were saying, from one area, like when you were growing up, Jed, or if they were sort of spread out. I know for my family, my English family, my cousins who stayed in England, they all live in the same area where my grandparents were, and only a handful of cousins who came to the United States. But it's not like anybody went to go live in London. If they live in England, they all sort of live in the same town. So that's a very different experience for a lot of kids, like we're talking about, who are in more nuclear families and spread out around the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so very important. Saadia, as someone who immigrated to this country, one of the things we talked about tonight, I was aware of it, but it wasn't at the front of my mind. This whole idea, your mother came over and had been the head of a college, and now she's here and she's not able to do that because her degree and her experience isn't respected or given the same weight. And you yourself, you shared that some of your experience and degrees didn't transfer here. What's some of the other things that immigrants, what are some of the other real difficulties that immigrants face when they come here to the United States?
That's a great question. I can only speak from my own experience or from my family members. It differs so much based on, I feel, even income level, and language. I have a lot of family who did not grow up in Pakistan, where I'm from, speaking English. And so even though they've been here 30, 40 years, they still struggle. I've had several of them say, "You're so lucky, we still can't communicate properly." And people think we're dumb, or they think, well, this is why people shouldn't come here. You can't even speak the language. And they might have PhDs, or they might have, they might be really contributing in other ways, but language barriers become so difficult to surmount the older you get, because kids pick it up, parents and grandparents don't. If you're not, if you don't have a kind of job that is really hard, for example, my husband's in IT, so he thankfully never had a problem. He hit the ground running. He was actually studying in university here, but he got a job and he left, and he's never looked back. But if you are in another kind of job profession, it's harder to just hit the ground running. A lot of times it's the kids who suffer, even if they are American born. They end up seeing, what their parents are going through. For example, in our book, A Place at the Table, Sarah, who's the character with her family from Pakistan, she's got a real chip on her shoulder. She really is the kind of person who just like snaps at people and thinks that everyone is just out to be mean to her, because she's seen that with her family and how people treat them. How do you get over that? Those are psychological things. I know my kids are going through a lot of stuff that I wish they didn't, and it's not because it's not because of me, but they're still being treated differently in their school. They're not treated as somebody who's like them. They're always seen as somebody who's different, especially if your name is different and it's pronounced incorrectly. It's ridiculous. It's sad. And if our book can do something to change that even a little bit, I think that would be my biggest goal.
I think there's so much that can come from this, and I know that we've talked a lot about how important it is for kids to see themselves reflected in the pages of books. But Saadia, I wonder, how important do you think it would be for the quote-unquote all-American kids that your kids attend school? How important is it for them to see characters whose family originates from Pakistan or Iran or from different countries in Africa? How important is it for those kids to see positive characters portrayed in books?
Oh, it's equally important. I think it's these two issues that we, very easily say mirrors and windows, where, they're two, it's like two sides of the same coin. I don't think that there's any, either one of them are less important than the other. A book like ours, it's important for kids like my kids, but it's also important for kids who are not like my kids, because the purpose is the same, right? If you are living in a society where everybody, where you think that you're pretty okay, but no one else does, it's hard to be that hero of your story just because you think it. Other people also should be able to think that and look at you like that. So they go hand in hand, and that's why authentic representation is also important, right? If I write a book about a character that I know nothing about and I haven't lived in that experience, then I am, as an author, I'm doing kind of a disservice, because I'm going to make mistakes probably. That will be very hard to communicate the real nature of the challenges or any kind of experiences that those characters feel. But absolutely, the kids who are my children's peers should be able to say, oh, I don't always have to be the one who saves the day. I don't have to always be the one who, who's the main character. And that's pretty healthy. We want to be global citizens. We want to be one part of an entire world, and not see ourselves as Americans or as one, maybe the majority group as this is the only way to be. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A lot of times kids who are different then try to emulate that as well, right? There's so many times when I have to remind my kids to speak Urdu, you're going to forget. Or, it's okay if you eat the food that we cook at home. You don't always have to be eating pizza, which, I'm not the kind of parent who's insisting on that. But I do know that as they get older, they're going to be moving away from things that make them different, and I want them to feel pride and happiness in their own culture and heritage as well.
Absolutely. You know, Laura and Saadia, one of the things that I was thinking about when I was reading the blurb on Amazon describing a place at the table, and I know you folks don't necessarily write that. That's the publishers and the marketing people. But they describe Sarah as a Pakistani American. And it immediately reminded me of one of my heroes in talk radio when I was a kid and would stay up after midnight with a transistor radio. Underneath a transistor radio was this little radio that ran on batteries and before the internet. And I would listen to this talk show host, Larry Glick, here in Boston. And he had a thing, if someone would call up and say, hey, I'm an Irish American, I'm a Pakistani American, he would always correct them and say, no, you are American of Pakistani descent. You're an American of Irish descent. And I love that. But I'd like to take that an extra step, and I'd like us to all start thinking, as Saadia, as you were saying, I'm a human being of Pakistani descent, of English descent, of Irish descent, and help our kids start seeing each other as what we are, as brothers and sisters, all human beings trying to make our way in this world. And I'm really, really happy, Saadia and Laura, that you've created a place at the table. Laura, can you remind everybody where they can go to find out more about a place at the table and also find out more about your writing?
Sure. You can visit my website, which is laurashovan.com. Our book, you can find it on the HMH Kids website or all of the major retailers. I've been using bookshop. I think it's .org, but it might be .com lately, because when you buy a book through that website, they make donations to independent booksellers. I know that if you buy a book through the Ivy Bookshop, which is my local indie, they will send it to you with a signed book plate signed by both of us.
Awesome. And Saadia, where can we go to find out more about your Yasmin series and the other books that you're writing?
I think my website is the best place. It's just my full name, so as long as, it's spelled correctly, SaadiaFaruqi.com. Or the Yasmin series is through Capstone, which is a publisher. You can, obviously go to their website. And all my other books. That's, we're all over. Social media is pretty big now. I feel like nobody even visits websites anymore. It's all, where you are on Twitter and Instagram. So everywhere, I am just my full name. Okay. I'm always we're both always happy to talk about our book. If you read our book in a setting where, whether it's a school or with your kids or with family, we're always happy to answer questions, to talk to you about it. Because it's a heavy book, there are heavy, important topics in it. So if there's a way that you read it, but then you want to digest it and you want to kind of see how you can implement some of those things in your own life.
Awesome. We've had a wonderful, wonderful time speaking tonight to the authors of A Place at the Table, Saadia Faruqi and Laura Shovan. Saadia, Laura, thanks so much for being part of the show.
Thank you, Jed. It was great to talk to you again.
Thank you.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We have two great authors celebrating their individual books. Elwyn Autumn will be here. She'll be returning to the show to celebrate Teddy Bear Tea. We'll also be joined by A.C.L. Tintis, who'll be celebrating I Don't Want to Be a Dragon Without Teeth. That's the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. If you are listening to this podcast when we publish it in November of 2020, there's still some time to get in on the great Wonder Crate giveaway. Go to our social media pages, Facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, Reading with Your Kids on Instagram, @JedleyMagic on Twitter. Just like and share our posts about Wonder Crate, and you can be entered to win your own Wonder Crate. And please be sure to go to WonderCrateKids.com. Use the code word READ to save up to 10% off of every subscription that is available. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so very wonderful. Of course, want to thank our guests, Laura Shovan and Saadia Faruqi. Be sure to check out A Place at the Table. Also want to thank our sponsor, Wonder Crate. I want to thank my incredible team, starting with my amazing daughter, Alejandra Doherty, my incredible producer, Fatima Khan. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me, but most of all, I want to thank you. Thank you for taking the time to join us today, and as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.